Yeah, we're driving for innovation. We see a constant pace. Everything's urgent. That's not the fundamentals for creativity, is it? That doesn't create free-flowing state. Not a creative studio. What you're effectively creating is an old-style factory.
Today, we're going to explore creativity and the role of mindset to tell authentic stories. And I'm being joined today by a very special guest, Dipak Dave. Dipak is a certified executive coach and leadership thought partner who helps high-performing leaders to lead with deeper impact using an approach that is holistic, that blends neuroscience, mindfulness, and human-centered connection. Dipak, welcome. We've got some great topic here to explore today. Before we get into the kind of the meat and bones of it, what's the best piece of advice you've ever had or received? And how has it impacted your life?
Not so much as a piece of advice as a motto that my dad has always said. And when I was younger, we used to hear it and kind of think of it in a kind of almost a comical sense. But it was something that he always used to say whenever faced with any of life's challenges, anything kind of went slightly wrong or awry. He'd always say this phrase, which was, "Oh dear, what a pity, never mind." And on the surface, it sounds really quite flippant. But as the older I've got and I've got to kind of understand it and think of it a little bit more, it's got a lot more depth to it than what you hear. So it's kind of a powerful way of navigating for me uncertainty. So, the oh dear is all about acknowledgement, acknowledging that something's gone wrong, that something might hurt, something may not be what we wanted, but we're not denying it. We're not pushing it away. And then what a pity is kind of that sense of compassion, like, taking in a moment of kindness for self, for others, etc. And then never mind is kind of that sense of release, let it go.
What a beautiful thing. So let's kind of get into the meat and bones, Dipak. So you're a coach, very aware of that, and like you said, you're not a psychologist. We had to talk about before this. So let's just talk about that a little bit. In your coaching leaders and teams, how does genuine human connection translate into better creativity, and beyond that, in the words of decision making or performance at work?
I see this over and over again as a coach when I'm coaching leaders. You notice that where there is real human connection, there is a connection to performance, whether that's through motivating, whether that's through collaboration, problem solving, general team satisfaction. It all improves because connection is what psychological safety is built on, and psychological safety for me is fundamental. There was actually a study done by Google back in 2012. They kind of embarked on a study to say, well, how do we understand what makes the perfect team? What makes a really effective team? And so they spent 2 years doing it. They interviewed 180 teams, something like 37,000 people, and they came back with the one big thing that changes everything was psychological safety. When people felt safe in the teams, performance changed. Effectiveness changed. There were other things that came out of that as well. So things like dependability. So psychological safety was the foundation, if you like. And then it was things like dependability. We can trust each other. We can depend on each other. There's structure and clarity in terms of our roles and where we fit in the organization, what we do. Meaning, what are we doing? What is the meaning behind what we're doing? And some sense of impact, that we're having an impact. And they found that these were so psychological safety is for me the kind of business catalyst, because when you have psychological safety, a couple of things happen, right? You feel safe sharing sort of half-formed, half-baked ideas. You're happy to just chuck it in there because you're not fearing judgment or you're not fearing kind of persecution for that, if at worst. It challenges assumptions, moves us away from kind of not accepting the status quo, which drives innovation. And, people can admit that they don't know, right? If you don't know, you don't know. And it sets that place for vulnerability. And for me, those are the kind of the raw materials for creativity, because creativity it's a messy process, right? It's not
It is a messy process, for sure.
It's not a sequential thing, right? So I think that's key, and it helps with good decision-making, things like that. I think disconnected teams, it's the opposite. In disconnected teams, people are sort of busy protecting their own position. They're avoiding risk. You may get kind of groupthink because you're not willing to stand out because it's too scary to stand out and be noticed or be different.
Be put down because there isn't that psychological safety.
Exactly. And then what happens is I think what you end up is creativity becomes like a purely cosmetic thing. You get a lot of yes, that sounds great kind of thing. Whereas in a connected team, people are willing to be wrong. Uh, they're willing to be wrong in service of getting it right. And I think that's where the breakthrough comes for me.
I mean, I think that psychological safety is incredibly important. I mean, if I think about the team we have here at NRG Studios, the one thing we say is there's no wrong answer. There's no bad creativity. It's just like, we want to hear from the heart, basically, of, what you think this should look like, what you think the business should look like, because, I do fundamentally believe that if you have a team that understands that they have a leader that isn't going to put them down every 2 minutes about, oh, that's a bad idea, or that's a bad idea. Like, there is no such thing as a bad idea. The ideas can develop, and that comes through what you're saying about that psychological safety piece.
And psychological safety is built on connection. And
Yes.
connection is not a soft thing. It's not a soft skill, right? It's fundamental to our human need, right? Kind of, its connection is essential for both our mental and physical health. So it's not something that we
Absolutely.
need to. It's connecting back to who we are, which is really important.
Yeah. Now we live in a world of, certainly my world, and I'm sure part of your world. We live in this kind of world of innovation. We must innovate. We must innovate. We must innovate. And some of that innovation is within, operating within high stress environments. Okay. So I guess kind of what have you seen in your coaching experience in leaders, probably in very, very big businesses and likewise, where actually in those conditions, how do you unlock the creativity within teams? And again, kind of what shuts it down?
Yeah, this is a common one. You hear it a lot, right? We want innovation. We're driving for innovation. We want to create the conditions that we're, and then what do we see in reality against that, right? We see a constant pace, a constant urgency to everything. Everything's urgent. Everything's back to back. I was meeting some people just yesterday. I met a CEO yesterday, and literally she had gone from back to back to back in terms of meetings. There is this underlying fear of failure that we spoke about. Everything is to be tracked, everything's to be measured, there's got to be efficiencies, all these things, right? You're not really, that's not the fundamentals of creativity, is it? That doesn't create kind of a kind of free flowing state. It's not a creative studio. What you're effectively creating is an old style factory where it's about efficiencies and productivity.
By the way, you're absolutely right. Right. So we all work in a high pressure environment. As much as I try not to have this place in a high pressure environment, it kind of is a high pressure environment. We've got clients that, commission us to make content for them. They want it in a timely manner. They want it to be amazing. And then, so there's that kind of thing, that kind of high pressure to get this stuff delivered. But the flip side of that is, so how do you carve out space? I guess kind of what are the benefits? Talk to me about the benefits. Why businesses should do more of this, to become more creative.
Like if you want to drive, you can't have a sort of a paradoxical kind of intent, right? You can't have any intent of saying, actually, we need to slow down, we need to create space, but actually we need to have efficiency measures. We need to we need to have meeting. Three things. One is conscious awareness. Two is intention, and three is presence. You've got to be consciously aware of what you're doing. You've got to be intentional around it and say, like you did, right? We're going to take some time out. And during this time, we're going to be present and just talk about the Christmas tour, right? It's about that. That's it. We don't need to worry about what's going to come next. And let's not worry about what we just experienced. That this is what we're doing here. Let's at least be free in this space.
Yeah.
We're not saying ignore the kind of like all this. That's always going to be there. But it's how do you bring it in? And I think I think spaciousness is really important. That kind of slowing down to speed up is something I
Yeah.
talk a lot to leaders about. We seem to think as things get more and more, we need to go faster and faster. But actually, the truth is, we'll achieve more by slowing down. And that's kind of like creating an unhurried mental space. There's a thing we talk about in terms of psychological safety and having no idea be a bad idea, etc. Is really key as well. And I think the other thing is like having, in a funny way, I think having set constraints, and that's the intentionality around it, right? If we know that there's a budget, there's a time constraint, there's limitations that we've got to work to that might focus the imagination around what we need to do.
Yeah.
Combine that with the spaciousness, and now you're kind of, and the intent of doing it and the awareness that this is it, I think you create more. But if I'm really honest, what I would love to see is a reintroduction of the art of play.
The art of play. Let's explore that a little bit more then, Dipak.
So when we were kids, right, we used to play. It was our default system. We'd go out and if you found yourselves sitting around with nothing, no devices back in our day, a stone and a stick could become a 3-hour long game.
Yeah, very true.
We just let
Yeah.
our minds be free, right? We wouldn't be playing to achieve anything. They wouldn't even be winners and losers. We were just simply exploring. We were kind of breaking things, sharing things. We were saying, what if? And then the other one goes, well, what if this? And then we just build on it. And I think that state of curiosity needs to come back alive. It's something that we've lost.
It does open up creativity in all extremes, right? Not just in what we do or, graphic design or, the various kind of services we offer. It opens up the minds beyond being told, looked at, just absorbing this stuff. You are physically doing something. Space should be carved out to have the art of play, absolutely, or anything like that. But within the space of kind of that creative play, almost coming up with ideas. What about this and what about that? And actually a bit more of that. And I think going back to what you're saying about you got to slow down to speed up. In my cycling world, which I adore,
Yes.
as you well know, one of the things they talk about is to get stronger, you need to go slower.
Yeah.
If you need to, it's not about going full pace all the time. It's actually about slowing down and cycling real slow, and that actually builds a stronger heart. And it's no different, is it?
And you can find those kind of parallels through so many sports around, this kind of sense of slow down to speed up, slow down to get, when you're taking the penalty and all that kind of stuff, right? It was Pablo Picasso, I think, who said that every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain an artist when we grow older. And I think what happens is as we get older, things like shame and fear and this kind of constant interruptions come in. And that just,
So I think some of that's kind of very much around kind of, mindset. We hear this thing around, mindset is everything. Okay. So what do you think about, so what do personal narratives or self-beliefs, play in that kind of leadership growth and business success? And I guess that there, within that mix is that kind of creative element, isn't it?
yeah, definitely. It's become a bit of a cliche, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Mindset is everything. But like so many cliches, and I think this is partly the age of memes and stories and Instagram and all this, is where the depth of these things have been said for years, right? These aren't new. These aren't new ways of thinking. Mindset is everything. This has been for millennia, right? It's been said. So I think we've forgotten it, and it is something very real. We, all of us, leaders, everyone, we live within a story that we've created ourselves, and that creates our reality. So whatever we have the story, the narratives within our minds that have been formed through our experiences, our past experiences growing up, our teachers, our parents, our societies. These are things that are real to us, and those do drive the way we see the world and the way we behave, the way we show up. There's absolutely no doubting that, right? So if you have an inner story that says, I'm a leader, I'm only valuable if I've got the answers, then you're going to build a team that's not very empowered. You're going to get people who are coming to you all the time. If your story is, that people can't be trusted, you're going to micromanage, and you're going to veil it in the story of, oh, we're just trying to set high standards.
Yeah.
And these come from a story. So I think real growth happens, and I say this always, right? Real growth happens through awareness. And when a leader starts to understand and see the stories that you've been living in. So when you start understanding the stories and realize This is a story, it's not a fact.
Yeah.
That's the moment that you can create choice. And that's the moment where you can start exploring ways to update or recreate new stories. If you think of it like, I talk about operating systems, right? We operate no source code in an operating system. And we can put, tools, structures, strategy all around that, right? But until we actually get to the source code, until we get to the operating system and upgrade that, then we're just going to continue. So if the stories play small, don't take risks, don't be seen, your decisions, your behaviors, etc., everything will reflect that. So I think it's fundamental that the
To
stories
try and
we
get
are
that, to
create
try and
some
work
reality.
that out. Yeah, to try and work what your own source code is, and to break those kind of negative stories or that mindset around, well, I can't do this and I can't do that because of these constraints, is to break that, because we all sometimes make up our own stories in perhaps not so positive ways all the time.
This is it,
Um,
right? I mean, I think
yeah,
as leadership, if you want to grow as a leader, you really need to understand yourself. You need to have a conscious understanding of what the stories are and become the author of the new story. And I think that's the key bit people kind of, and so, yeah, I think that's absolutely fundamental, not just for leaders, for everyone.
so you talked about tools
Mm.
there, Dipak, and for it's got to be a millennia, right? That kind of storytelling as a leadership tool, right? So I've seen it in my, the work that we do here, where we go and film great leaders, talk to great leaders across all sorts of business, and what they are doing constantly is telling stories. Whatever that story may look like, whatever that narrative might be, typically it's around business performance or what we need to do this year, et cetera, et cetera. But effectively what they're doing is telling a story. So why do you, even in the day, in the world that we live in today, why do you think that storytelling is still one of the most powerful tools in modern leadership? Okay. And how do you feel like, and you must have seen this in some of the people that you've worked with, how do leaders use it to shape culture, to trust, and alignment with business goals?
The reason it's been around for millennia and is still around is because our brains literally process the world through narratives. When we remember past experiences, we create stories around it. We don't remember spreadsheets or data. Right? We
Not
don't
at all.
remember that we might, we may remember that it was a hot day, but we're not going to remember it was 27 degrees, right? And it's the experience and the story that we build around that really connects with us, right? It's stories that makes us feel what others feel. It builds that empathetic connection. When you share a story, or when you watch something, I mean, you know, right? I mean, you've created award-winning stories yourself that have connected with the audience. Then it activates parts of our brain. It activates parts of our physiology that makes us connect to it. We almost start to physiologically start to feel the way they do. So not just empathy, we start creating, like we watch a rom-com or we watch a thriller, we're releasing, hormones and things in our body that actually change our physiology, right? We know we're sat on a sofa, we jump, right? So that's
Yeah, absolutely.
storytelling, right? Because we know rationally where I'm sat here on a sofa. No one's going to jump out and do that to me, but we're in it. We're deeply in it. And I think that good story really connects. And I think if I talk about in terms of the danger of the bland story, is that you don't connect. That it becomes almost like spin. Becomes
Or just a simple message, isn't it? Sometimes if even on a simple message, which you can turn a message into a really powerful story, people will emotionally connect with it stronger, won't they? So, I saw, a while back now, but so at the time, the leader of the CEO of John Lewis and the CEO of Waitrose, they were brilliant storytellers, absolutely fantastic storytellers. And during their time at both those, great British institutions, despite what anyone thinks of them, great British institutions, the stories that they told in the events that we were working them with were brilliant. And they told them over and over again. This is the thing that I was really surprised about the first time I heard it. I was like, that's an incredible story. And Mark, who ran Waitrose, told a story about trains. Basically, his thing was trains. So he told this story around trains. And what he was actually doing was building a story around how they're going to take the business on a journey. But within that was the context of, we need to grow profitability. This is what it means to you. So, but he wasn't just saying we need to grow profitability and we need to do it this way and we need to do it that way. He built a whole narrative around it, and it shifted the dial.
Absolutely. We get to understand it gives that whole strategy, if you like, meaning. And it's a way for everyone to be able to share that story. And in that instance, everyone has an ability to be part of that story. Right? They know where they sit within the story and how they can help the story come alive.
Yeah. Now, bear in mind, if I think about what you just said there, that was 13 years ago.
And you still remember.
Okay. And I still remember it now. Okay. And I remember both stories very, very clearly. I couldn't repeat them like now, but I remember the narrative of each story. And I just, at the time, remember thinking, crikey, this is impressive, even at the time. And of course, Steve Jobs, classic. He was an absolutely fantastic storyteller.
Exactly.
There are so many we can recount, aren't there?
Absolutely. And in terms of driving culture, right? I think not every story is not about being heroic or kind of showing, look at me, I'm so clever. It's that vulnerability as well. I've spoken to a number of. I was speaking to a CEO and founder of a company, and he had the most amazing backstory. And when he used to talk about the business, he'd tell me like the business stuff, and I had the privilege of sitting there and listening to his backstory. And I said, you need to share this story because this story is what drives people to understand why you do what you do, why this business is what it is today. Not just you. I said, if everyone comes into this, they now become a part of the story, and it starts to build a culture. His was around, this kind of sense of adventure and what he'd achieved in terms of travel, and it was fascinating. It was so many kind of incidents that you'd think this could be made into a film,
Yeah.
but he'd never shared it. He'd never shared it with anyone. And I think the minute he did, and it starts people, both customers and employees, and it starts building this culture of trust. Again, this empathy, this sense of ability to connect, and it energizes everyone behind the story. Builds that connection, right? We're talking about connection, that human connection. It's the stories
Yeah.
it's that sitting around the fire that connects us, and we can
Yeah.
go,
The
oh,
power of human
needs.
connection. Yeah. We all live in this world now, don't we? Where it's like content on demand, 10, 15 seconds, stupid little skits, blah, 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 right? So kind of you keep that in mind. So with these kind of constant platforms, constant feeds, short attention spans, how do you think that businesses should kind of adapt to their storytelling without losing depth and authenticity? And I think this is actually genuinely a really interesting thing to talk about, because I think a lot of depth and authenticity is lost through these, almost, I don't want to call it slop. I think that's a little bit unfair, because obviously there are brands putting out, but that's a bit unfair. But it's like, I don't know. I always think a bit like bubble gum. You chew a bit of bubble gum, you throw it away. It's a bit like that, isn't it, in some respects?
We know that everyone's got short attention span. Everyone wants to have impact, and they want to kind of connect, right? I think it comes back to what I said earlier. What's the intention? And I think the intention is that if we're chasing clicks with shallow content, and we're just
Yeah.
trying to be louder, we're trying to be faster, we're trying to be, this kind of like be more frequent, meet the algorithm, make sure the algorithm so that you're at the top of it, then that's not the intention, is it? You're not doing what you intended to do. If the intention is to connect, then that's where you need to begin. And I think what you end up with is you end up with a lot of noise and very little depth.
Yeah.
And I think what's missing nowadays is that we want attention, but it's become quite superficial. The pace and the depth is where you need to go, and the depth has to make a real connection. It has to be something real that connects people. So in the workplace and leaders, etc., comes back to the whole: what's the story? What's the meaning? It's the vulnerability, and maybe it's almost like short personal stories of that. If you're a CEO and you want to kind of share your career story, share some of your failures, share some of your learnings.
So Amazon have employed a full-time content creator to follow around Jeff Bezos.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is
They're
is
paying
that
him a lot
for
of money to do it.
what's
But
the intention?
well, the profile to show him as a real character with real depth, with and yeah, that and it's happening.
Well,
Um, and I can kind of see why, because these business leaders, figures that are in our world, and whether because like all these things, whether you like them or I like them or don't like them, it kind of doesn't matter, because the audience is so huge. There will be people who will love Jeff Bezos. All of these sometimes controversial leaders across the globe, of which there are many, who have high profiles. It's a personal brand, isn't it, that they're trying to get out there, to ultimately extend their reach.
and the content that connects, but is much like the reality TV. The reason that takes off is because it's now I can relate to this.
Yeah.
There's a depth to it. It's not superficial.
So I'm gonna switch up now to the world of AI. Okay, so the world of AI, which is sometimes feels like it's taken over our lives at times. So what are your thoughts? I think this is more kind of thoughts here. So kind of leaning into your coaching leadership and leaning into talking to other business owners about maybe AI. Now, maybe there is and maybe there isn't. So when teams use AI, and kind of how you're seeing AI change the way people brainstorm, communicate, build ideas in organizations, kind of what do you think is the upside of it? And I can talk a little bit about this as well. And what do you think the risk is?
There's no denying the speed at which this thing operates at. There is no denying the breadth and depth that this thing. I think what we've got to do is two things. We've got to recognize that we need to bring the human heartbeat, the things that make us human, our wisdom, our lived experiences, the things that we would know that it wouldn't. And we've not got to be lazy and just expect it to have all the answers and do that. We've got to keep the work going, the deeper work, the deeper thinking, creative work that we do has to continue. I think it's going to be worse when we become, there's a danger that everything becomes homogenous, because the truth is, we can see it, right? I think LinkedIn was an interesting space where suddenly posts started appearing, and then people were writing, and you can tell the ones that are
AI.
written through AI, but you can also see the ones that have used AI. And if you ask them, they say, "Yeah, sure, I used AI," but actually they brought their story to it. They brought something about them to it, which kind of differentiated it.
I think in the creative space, I went to the AI Creative Summit at the BFI recently, and it was a fascinating day. And there were a lot of industry leaders there, a lot of AI leaders there, if AI leaders is right. And I think in the creative space, there's a lot of fear around AI. But and I must admit, when it first came out and it was exploding, I was like, oh my God, is my business going to be around in like 5 years' time because it's going to take over the world and blah, blah, blah. But what I've come to realize is really, really quickly, I have to say, what I've come to realize is AI is a tool, right? And like you said, we still need to have that kind of deep human thinking, the human approach to things. I think where AI is really, really useful is in speeding up processes. I mean, we are finding that in our workflow and love it, frankly. It doesn't, in the world that I'm in, the content creation world, AI, there's this kind of miseducation, I think, or false assumption that AI speeds up the process of coming up with creative ideas. Okay, what it can do is it can, rather than starting with a blank page, you can kind of put some ideas down and it will come up with a few ideas, but they ultimately shouldn't be the final idea. And you start to develop those ideas in a deep human way, but then you still have to go through the same kind of process. And really I think because there is that human element, you have to really think about, if you're doing an AI film, for example, just an AI film, well, what are the prompts? How can I make it more human in the story that I want to tell, that will resonate with the audience, that I want this to land with, right? So it's not that it's going to take over. And I do think that the businesses that don't really grasp AI and the importance of how it's going to change fundamentally, not just our businesses, but it is going to change the human race. The ones that don't go with it and learn it and get educated by it and enthused by it are the ones that will be left behind.
Yeah.
I mean, fundamentally they will, right? But like in the deepness of all this is that emotion, human connection, and yes, these are not real people we're creating through prompts. But I think trying to give it that kind of human element as much as you can will still give you that human connection on some level. That's kind of my thinking around
I
it.
mean, we've seen how fast this has happened, right? The exponential nature of this. So this is going to just there's a lot more still to come, and it's coming faster than we think, right?
Yeah.
That's the truth, right? We talk about AI, but there's now this, you might have heard of AGI, right? Artificial general intelligence, which is almost trying to mimic the brain. We're talking about singularity, point at which, computer processing becomes equivalent to the brain, right? So there's a lot more to come. I like to the way I think of AI is it's like a really enthusiastic intern that you can set off and
What
go,
a great way of putting
go do
it.
your thing, right? Go and find everything for me, and then bring it back, and then I get to decide what's meaningful, what else. Oh, that's interesting. Go and find out a bit more about that. Oh, actually, that's quite. No, that's not what we want. You're going off on a tangent now. It's almost treated like that kind of. I mean, it effectively is an intern at this point. It's learning itself, right?
Yeah.
And so, if we view it in that way and say, so then we maintain that kind of human connection, and we bring what we bring best, which is, as I said earlier, right? It's the human heartbeat. It's the kind of, and it creates space. I think if we use it right, and we use it for what it's designed for, there is a space here for us to expand ourselves,
Absolutely.
go further
That's
into the consciousness and further into kind of awareness and depth of creativity.
Absolutely. Ultimately, this thing's a muscle, right? And it needs to be worked out. And if we don't work it out, we will become, a large population of society will just believe everything AI. Well, during this AI summit, I'd never heard this before, but one of the things that they came back to, one of the subject matters they came back was AI hallucinates. AI hallucinates. I thought, oh yeah, that's very true actually, because sometimes we kind of take, and like going back to LinkedIn posts, Dipak, sometimes we just take it as read. Well, AI's come up with that, so it must be right. And actually, I recently had something, and we're like, that's not right. So I rewrote the command, and then even then, it's like, no, I still need my human element to that. So the hallucination, and the other interesting phrase I heard was synthetic media, which I thought was really apt. It's synthetic, but going back to the question, right, of keeping that human in human with AI as collaboration, you still need that element of being human and everything that comes with to be able to control AI. I think the other thing, Deepak, is saying, you know, the being human, right? Every single human on this planet is different. We have different narratives, we have different stories, whether we've made those narratives up before they've happened or not. We have different outlooks on life. AI doesn't have that. It doesn't have that, what's the word I'm looking for? Humanization, I guess.
That's got that lived experience.
No, it doesn't have lived experiences. And that, I think, fundamentally will always, I'd like to think anyway, ask me again in 5 years' time. I'd like to think that it's that where AI cannot take away from what each one of us is. Okay, let's go for future facing. Okay, I'm really interested to hear what you got to say about this. Right, so let's looking ahead. Kind of, what do you think? Oh, this is such a big question. What do you think, skills wise, mindsets? How much do you think that will matter for leaders trying to build kind of creative, connected, high trust organizations in, like we just talked about, in an AI shaped world?
The constant I always say is leadership is not a role, right? It's not something you do. It's not a state of doing. Leadership is a state of being, and a being comes from who we are because we're human beings. I think AI will help us do better with the doing. But as leaders, we need to be, we need to be leaders. We need to be human. We need to get better at being. And I think that's the way I would phrase it. I would couch it as that, as in that way. And I think that's the difference. Is allow it to do its doing, let it do its doing, and that we need to find better ways of, like, we're going to always face complexity.
Always.
Right? We're always going to face change. We're always going to have things that we're going to have to make decisions faster. We're going to have challenges thrown at us. Time is going to become constrained. Money is going to be constrained. These are all things that are going to come at. And whilst AI might be able to generate logical solutions, at the end of the day, you've got to sit in the middle of that with presence, with a sense of equanimity. And I think this is where leadership needs to go. In an ideal world, I think we need to build more presence, calm, a sense of being that we can hold complexity within the system, but not react to it, but learn to respond to it. We need to be connected to the people to keep them in that state. I think we need to be leaders that can help guide them, guide our people, guide organizations, guide beyond that, and not get pulled into the maelstrom, the kind of the whirlwind that's going around you. And I think that's ultimately, so it's this kind of sense of equanimity, curiosity, not control, right? Just stay curious, continue to have that relationship and that relational intelligence and perspective. Kind of step back, right? Everyone's kind of down there. Step back every so often and look at the bigger picture.
I feel like it's almost. Apologies, I can't actually remember what it is now. But what you were saying at the very beginning of this is what's the the mantra that you have in your family. It's that.
It's, oh dear, what a pity. Never mind.
Oh dear, what a pity. Never mind. Dipak, it's been amazing. I've got one last question for you. Okay, so maybe it's not a creative challenge, but if I said to you kind of what creative challenge would you love to tackle, but haven't had an opportunity to do so yet?
I'd love to get a group of CEOs and leaders, right? Technologists and artists, and throw them in a room to play. Right? Create this kind of like,
love that idea.
And the idea is like, it's let's tackle some of the bigger things, right? Let's talk about, how are we going to look at the future of making decisions? How are we going to make sure that we can keep some sense of AI in service to humanity rather than, huge companies? How do we build the rituals for connection? Because I think that's where we're going. We're going back to rituals, right? We're going to need to, like this remote working, all that. We're going to need to find rituals for maintaining connection. I think for me, I call it it's the intersection between business, creativity, and consciousness.
It's almost like you've just rounded off Connected Minds there, because that's exactly what this is all about. So thank you very much, Dipak. It's been an absolute pleasure. I really, really appreciate your mindset and your thinking and the way you kind of present and think about, storytelling and community and kind of connection. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Thank you, Rob.
So thank you very much, Dipak.
Thank you. I love talking with you. I could talk for hours.
If you enjoyed this show, like, subscribe and follow us. All reviews are welcome. We have lots more fantastic guests in future episodes of Connected Minds. Now at NRG Studios, we specialise in supporting businesses by crafting buyer journeys that captivate, engage and convert prospects to loyal customers. Our team of creative experts blends dynamic moving images with strategic digital ecosystems that connect buyers emotionally to your brand. So let's partner and build a visual experience that drives real results, and reach out today and let's bring your brand story to life. Thanks for listening. Until next time.